Football with Sam. What's going on, man?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm tired, but I'm very happy with the fact that week one is here and we have several more weeks and several more games left. So I'm
Yeah,
happy.
yeah, man. And we're on late tonight to react and break down a couple of the biggest games from the week one slate. And before we get into it, make sure that you guys go ahead, subscribe to my dude, College Football with Sam. I mean, he's going up right now. To me, not being biased, maybe a little biased, but Sam has the best college football content that you're going to find. He's the best college football content creator on YouTube, in my opinion. And make sure that you guys go ahead, subscribe to his channel, check him out. Also, make sure that you like the live, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we upload new content and when we drop new live streams. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find us on all audio platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. So, Sam, man, Notre Dame gets a gigantic win on the road against Texas A&M. I mean, this was one of those old-fashioned defensive slugfest. The quarterback play wasn't really that good. Connor Wigman was really underwhelming, to put it nicely. I mean, his two
Yes.
interceptions were inexcusable, but the defenses really showed up to play. And with this win, I really believe that it legitimizes Notre Dame as a true playoff contender, because from this point on, they don't really have too many tough games. And with the way this defense was able to control the line of scrimmage, they were able to lock down Texas A&M's wide receivers. And despite Texas A&M losing a lot of talent to the portal, I mean, from a talent standpoint, they still have one of the 10 best rosters in America. So, how are you feeling about Notre Dame after this performance on the road in Aggie Land?
I mean, I would think that they should go 12 and 0, but that's should. And should doesn't always happen in college football. I mean, as we saw today, A&M was favored to win this game. Oregon was favored to, blow out Idaho and they didn't. Um, People thought that West Virginia would do much better against Penn State. But just looking at how Notre Dame matches up with the rest of the teams on their schedule, you got Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, Virginia Army, and USC. Some on the road, some neutral field. All of those are Notre Dame's remaining opponents. And I don't know a single one of those games where right now I would pick Notre Dame to lose.
Yeah,
I
like
don't.
yeah, like for all the people that always are like Notre Dame's always overrated, why are they always ranked so high going into the season? You watch their play against Texas A&M tonight. I mean, although they are inexperienced, they don't return a lot of production from last year's team. This is probably the best Notre Dame team that I've ever watched in terms of just how dominant they've been from start to finish on the defensive side of the football. This is a defense that has a good secondary. They got multiple guys on the D line that can get after the quarterback. Not only are they a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to be one and done in the playoffs. They potentially could make it to the Final Four with how good they are defensively. You're going to be hard pressed to find too many teams that can match the physicality that Notre Dame has. And Riley Leonard, I'm not that high on him. You know, he's not the greatest passer in the world, but he's a really tough runner. He's really gutsy, and he came through when it mattered the most. And you know, their running back, Jeremiah Love, I love his playing style. Notre Dame always has bruisers as running backs. They're really physical, not really finesse. They just want to run through you. They get north and south. I mean, this is a Notre Dame team that is not overrated, and they showed that tonight. They more than have enough to be able to be a serious threat come playoff time and maybe win a playoff game or two. Now,
Yeah, I mean, the only reason it's partly, I don't know, because yeah, Notre Dame is a team that a lot of people do love to criticize and get on, but at the same time, looking at A&M and M and the fact that they are a new team with a new head coach, the quarterback was rather underwhelming, not even factoring in the defense. With Notre Dame's schedule, depending on how the chips fall, couldn't you also say that you may not know much about this team in relationship to how like elite they are at all? Because if USC is not, if they aren't good, if Georgia Tech isn't top 25 or top 20, if Florida State doesn't rebound, who else is on their schedule? I mean, there's no one who had a better shot of being top 10 based off of coaching and returning production and roster talent via recruiting than A&M. And they lost by double digits and got, I mean, defensively dominated
at home,
and worn down.
like it's not easy to go on the road and win at College Station. And this is
No,
a
it's not.
game where if you were taking Texas A&M to win outright, you weren't thinking that, yeah, they were going to get manhandled on the line of scrimmage. Their receivers were just going to get absolutely blanketed by Notre Dame secondary. You probably would have thought this game would have been somewhat of a shootout. Am I wrong?
I don't know exactly because A&M really, they did have good pieces on defense. They really did. I mean, whether it's Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton, Will Lee. I mean, they have players on defense. And they also have players on offense, but I mean, their D line's better than their O line. And it's the same with Notre Dame. I picked Notre Dame to win and originally had A&M winning earlier in the preseason, but I always thought this was going to be a game whose total would be in like the mid upper 40s. It never came across to me as a shootout. It was just who would be better in the trenches and which quarterback would make the occasional clutch play. And that turned out to be Riley Leonard because he ran well, didn't turn it over. Meanwhile, Wiegman, who I had, is close to an All-American in the preseason, looked awful. So that's a bust on my end.
And what also makes me believe in Notre Dame more after this win is the fact that there were a few moments during this game where they went for it on fourth down on their own end of the field. They get stopped. They give Texas A&M favorable field position, and yet they still win the game. You have to be a really great team to still be able to find a way to seek out a win despite having certain situations like those not go your way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I think that, I kind of shifted my chips a little bit. I didn't release a coaching ranking for this season, but I rated Marcus Freeman higher than part of me wanted to entering this year. And after today, I think that paid off. I mean, Notre Dame did what they had to do, and they trusted themselves to win. And they came out with a win. And at this point, based off of how that team played, the schedule they have, which is very nicely spaced out, they should go 12-0, at minimum 11-1. I mean, I don't see Florida State beating them. I don't see Georgia Tech beating them. I don't see USC beating them. I don't see Louisville. I mean, who's beating this team when they play at a B level or higher relative to their ceiling? I don't think anyone on their schedule will, unless maybe USC, everything falls right for them. But that's a hard ask for any team in college football.
Earlier today, Sam, there was murder committed in the swamp. Miami 41, Florida 17. And I'm going to just keep it 100. Yes, I am a Miami fan, and I did have the Hurricanes winning this game, but I never would have thought this would have just been an absolute slaughter fest. Like, from the opening kickoff to the final whistle being blown, Miami looked like the way more superior, more talented team. It was a coaching mismatch. And what was so funny to me, Sam, was how one of the biggest storylines heading into this matchup was Can Mario Cristobal be trusted going on the road to the Swamp? The Swamp is such a tough place to win at. But, people forgot that Mario Cristobal at Oregon went on the road and beat Ohio State and Columbus. This is somebody who's no stranger to these kinds of big games. And I never once trusted Billy Napier in this game. And all of the biggest criticisms of Billy Napier presented themselves in this game. I mean, once again, the play calling was super conservative. Wasn't a lot of throws past 20 yards downfield. The quarterback comparison, Cam Ward versus Graham Mertz looked like a McDonald's worker versus an NFL quarterback, in my opinion. I mean, without a doubt, Cam Ward is going to be playing on Sundays. This dude is a superstar. He is what's going to be the key factor to the revival and the resurgence of Miami football. I mean, Florida couldn't get anything on third down. I mean, they were 0-8.
No, they couldn't.
0-9, like, Sam.
Mertz looked. I'm not even kidding. He looked like 2021 Wisconsin, except Florida's defense is nowhere near that Wisconsin defense, which, by the way, for some of you who may criticize the Big Ten, that Wisconsin defense was like up there with Georgia's in efficiency. Their offense was just terrible because of Graham Mertz. He looked that way. Florida's defense was garbage. And combine that with the fact that Cam Ward has athleticism and he has intelligent decision-making and he has a good OC and wide receivers, you're not winning. And this is for the nth time in a row where a Billy Napier team has come out and just, instead of punching above its weight class, they let teams below their weight class bully them. I mean, Florida has the 12th most talented roster in all of college football per recruiting rankings, and they have lost to Florida State year over year. They got blown out by Miami. They have lost to teams like Arkansas at home, which I hate to break it to you, but no good coach loses to last year's Arkansas
at home. In the Swamp.
Yeah, doesn't happen. And the Swamp is a very tough place to play. But Michigan Stadium is, and when Rich Rod and Brady Hoke were coaching there, it didn't matter. They lost. Ohio Stadium's a tough place to play. And when Ohio State was bad in 2011, they lost at home to like a mediocre Penn State team and nearly lost. Like, home field advantage only gets you so far. The team is what matters. And Florida doesn't have a team. They don't even have a competent head coach. They have, Billy Napier's from the same cookie jar as Scott Frost is. Great in the group of five, but they're nowhere near ready for the Power Four. And outside of Samford, every game on Florida's schedule is losable. I mean, I don't think they're beating A&M. I don't think they're beating anyone after the Tennessee game. And UCF could boat race them.
And if
because
they'll
run the
UCF,
ball.
My bad for cutting you off, but they lose to UCF,
No,
you have to fire Billy Napier. You're 0-2 against the biggest schools in your own state. That's detrimental to recruiting and the perception of Florida football.
Yeah. And you know what's really toxic? Florida State would blow that team out. And they're not. And we don't even know if they're good. They would destroy them.
And what was more funny to watch on Florida side of this game was that, the coaching staff still had the same problems that they were dealing with last year. Not just with the conservative play calling, but the defense had several blown coverages. You had missed tackles, like guys were out of position. And Miami, there was one play where the receiver literally tore a guy's ACL. Transfer safety Azure Turner that came from Washington. I mean, he tried to tackle one dude and his leg damn near looked like it snapped off his bone, man. Like, everything that could have went right for Miami went right and then some. Like, I knew Cam Ward was going to be good, but I didn't think we were going to get prime time. After watching Cam Ward's performance against Florida, how do you feel about Cam Ward as far as his chances of being able to win the Heisman Trophy and how far he can take this Miami team? Could they be a natty contender possibly?
I need to think more about the latter question because this does look to be a very weak year. I thought that entering this year, I think week one confirmed that a little bit. I mean, think about it this way. Teams that I had in my top 10 entering, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but I'll answer your question. Teams that I had my top 10 entering this week were Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Texas, Missouri, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Georgia looked a little sluggish today. Alabama, Missouri, Ole Miss, Texas didn't play anyone of significance. So Oregon didn't either, and they struggled. Michigan played someone of a teeny bit of significance and struggled. Penn State, Ohio State played no one of significance, and they were pretty slow for a half, 3/4 of ball, a defensive touchdown. A few of them got them going. Really, like Georgia, Penn State held the most impressive win. Notre Dame, too, those three. And they didn't look perfect. So can Miami be a natty contender? I mean, I'd like to say no right now, but that isn't reality. I mean, I'll be forced to say I have to wait and see, because if it's October, November, and they're undefeated and they're killing everyone like how they're killing Florida, that is different than them having a loss to end the regular season and a few close wins. I mean, I've said in Ring this year, it's Georgia's year to lose. They are the nation's best team. And if Miami can just be elite in the trenches with what they have at quarterback and wide receiver, then they probably can be a natty contender. And to answer your question about Cam Ward and the Heisman, if Miami wins the ACC and he continues to put up the numbers that he has historically put up, that he put up today, and he replicates those, maybe with less turnovers than he had at Washington State, then he'll probably win the award, because the schedule's easy, so he can stat pad. It's a Power 4 conference, so it's not like he's Caden Salter at Liberty and no one cares. And even though the schedule's easy, a win in the swamp that's that dominant will be remembered by all the analysts because it's the SEC, even though Florida might be the worst team in the SEC. And finally, Florida State, maybe Georgia Tech, and definitely whoever appears in the ACC championship game, I would think are going to be ranked opponents. So he absolutely can. I mean, right now I'd have him as the favorite. I don't care that Jackson Dart had 500 yards against Furman. I mean, Michigan State in 2016 looked halfway decent against Furman, and they went 3-9. And Ole Miss beat Mercer by 70 last year and did nothing in big games. So what I want to stress in the stream for anyone watching is after week one, don't overreact, because there is a world where Notre Dame looks this good and then USC beats them to close out the year. There's a world where Texas enters Ann Arbor and Michigan continues to run the ball like they did in the fourth quarter against Fresno State, and they game control Texas to death. There is a world where Oregon wins the Big Ten despite only beating an FCS team by 10 points. I mean, don't overreact. Don't do it. And it's the same. Pause. There's an exception to that, which I'd say is Miami, Florida, because that's it's a close game, similar talent. No team was looking ahead to anything. That was both of their Super Bowls for the month of September.
Absolutely.
Both of them. And Florida blew it. I mean, Napier is as good as gone unless they pull out some miracle. It's only a matter of time.
Now, Georgia painted the walls of Mercedes-Benz Stadium with the blood of Dabo Sweeney and the whole entire Clemson football team. And, I thought Clemson could have covered that 13 and a half. I thought Clemson was going to be able to give these boys a dogfight. I thought the offense was going to be improved. I thought with the fantastic true freshman wide receivers they had, Brian Westcott, TJ Moore, they were going to have a big impact on this game. But not only did we not see them at all, but we didn't see no growth out of this offense. I mean, K. Klubnik still looks like K. Klubnik. I don't know who's worser, him or DJU. They both were in the same quarterback room for Clemson. I mean, Garrett Riley's offense just looks inept. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because they did play Georgia. But Clemson's defense, let's not act like Clemson's defense wasn't getting right with Georgia's offense for the first half. I mean, Clemson's defense was playing out of this world, okay? And Dabo Sweeney, after this loss, took accountability. He said, when you lose this bad, it's on the head coach. Yeah, it's all on you. And you would think if you would have utilized the transfer portal, got a couple of transfer offensive linemen, wide receivers to help solve those issues, this game could have been a little bit more closer. But what are your thoughts on this Clemson massacre that they sustained to Georgia? Does it say more about how good Georgia is, or does it show more of how Clemson has just fallen off from the ranks of being an elite program in college football?
It shows that Dabo Swinney is not even a top 25 head coach, and anyone who pretends otherwise is living in fantasy. With the talent they have, the coordinators they have, the assistant coaching hires that they made, they should have played competitively. Because, I mean, Georgia's O-line struggled for the first half. They had their star running back out. And, I mean, yes, Atlanta's technically Georgia home field, even though it's a neutral site. But I mean, come on. What was the final score? Like 34-3 was the final score? I mean, this Clemson used to be that team that had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and epic wide receivers and running backs you could rely on, in addition to a tough defense. What they are now is, I mean, they're kind of like the ACC's Iowa, except I would honestly say even worse, because they, I mean, come on. Because at least Iowa actually uses the portal in a limited supply. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It's sad. It's depressing, really, because Clemson, I mean, look, the ACC's still wide open, so maybe they could win it. But when you lose, like how they did, let me pull up some statistics for all of you who are watching. I mean, it was bad. I was at work in one of my final shifts of my summer job watching this, and my coworkers couldn't even believe their eyes at what are we watching?
I mean, Georgia
Clemson
outgained
ran.
them 447 yards to 188.
Yep. Yes, they did. And Georgia averaged over 8 yards per throw, over 6 yards per carry. Clemson averaged under 5 yards per pass attempt and exactly 2 yards per carry. Those are, as I said earlier, Clemson is somehow even worse than Iowa, because Iowa played Ohio State in 2022 and had 6 turnovers. And if my memory serves me correctly, Ohio State had to try harder to pull away by similar margins at home. Yeah, it's just that you don't have Brent Venables as DC, so you can't win games 17-10 anymore. You can win some, but not all of them. You can't
not
against
a behemoth like Georgia. Like eventually,
no.
And you felt this game with it starting off being a defensive slugfest, Clemson being able to come away with some key stops in the red zone. You were like, okay, Clemson's defense definitely is going to be elite this year. They probably could have the second best or the best defense in the SEC, but offensively, you knew the more this offense continued to struggle, eventually Georgia was going to break down the dam. And in the second half, the dam
Yes.
just completely blew up, and Georgia started whamming the ball downfield with the run backs. Once Georgia started to utilize their speed and their talent on the perimeter more, that's really what broke this game wide open. And I think of Clemson as a school that always has been good at recruiting talented skill position players, but you wouldn't have been able to tell that with how they looked in this game. It's like Clemson now is like a old sanctuary of what the previous era of college football used to be about: player development, recruiting, the transfer portal. But now, in today's age in college football, you got to be able to utilize the portal. You got to be able to use NIL to get some of these big name players. And for a school like Clemson, now they're just a name. And their name doesn't hold as much weight now in 2024 as what it used to a few years ago, because you're getting blasted 34-3 against Georgia. I mean, the last time you played them it was 10-3. They're
Yep.
like a relic.
Yeah, they are not an elite program. They do not even have a great head coach. I mean, there are so many coaches I would take over Dabo Swinney right now. I can name, just looking at the Big Ten, because that's my area of expertise, I would take Lincoln Riley. I would take Matt Rule. I would take Sharon Moore. I'd take Jonathan Smith, Luke Fickell, Dan Lanning, Ryan Day, of course. I'd take Greg Schiano. It's 8 in a single conference. And I mean, pardon what I'm thinking here, but the fact that Kirk Ferentz has been more willing to adapt than Dabo Swinney is like...
At least he's trying.
Yeah.
Dabo ain't trying at all.
I don't know why. It's not going to end well. I mean, Clemson, what they'll probably do, because I do think Georgia is that good, is they'll probably finish with a better or similar record compared to last season. But I'm telling you, App State comes to town next weekend. And what did App State do today? They're 1-0. Just want to see. Oh, they beat East Tennessee 38-10. Probably a little bit of a downer performance for their expectations. They're going to play Clemson tight. At least they probably will, given their history of playing North Carolina tight, of beating Texas A&M, of, just a whole bunch of different things. This is a crazy season of college football. But what I will say in the craziness is it's weak enough to where, like with Notre Dame, and I think Miami's going to be this way too, your best teams are going to have even better records than usual because they're going to sift through the chaos effortlessly. Like, who's stopping Notre Dame? Who's stopping Miami? I mean, I thought preseason that maybe Florida State or even Virginia Tech might stop Miami regardless of Cristobal. The only person who can stop Miami is themselves. It's the same thing with Notre Dame. It's the same thing with, I would say, Georgia or Alabama. I mean, I know Texas, we'll see how the SEC pans out. It's easily the best conference in the nation right now. The only, like in the Big Ten, no Big Ten team looked like a classic elite team. Ohio State looked sluggish against Akron. Michigan looked, just not even close to national title caliber against Fresno State. Neither did Oregon. And Penn State, while I think they showed like the highest possible ceiling because they played the best team, and when they were on against West Virginia, they still had stalled drives. And when they weren't explosive, they couldn't get much going, which is a question of consistency. And that's important in the SEC or the Big Ten. So I didn't exactly know where I was going with all this. I guess I went on a little tangent there, but I mean, Clemson is just so far behind everyone else. And if you put them in the SEC right now, 6-6, 7-5, maybe even worse,
Maybe
you
5
put
to
them in
7.
the Big, yeah, you put them in the Big Ten and you give them like Purdue's schedule, same thing. give them Rutgers' schedule, and maybe they go 9-3, 10-2. Maybe they win at all their other games, but I mean, it's just an atrocity.
Everybody, this is our guy, College Football with Sam. Make sure that you guys go ahead, subscribe to this channel, check him out. And before we let you go, man, because we've reached that 30-minute mark, I got one more question I want to ask you, man. So,
Yep.
Colorado is getting a lot of hate for barely beating North Dakota State. Are we going to hold that same energy with Oregon barely beating Idaho? They were like a 48-point favorite. And Sam, I lost so much money today taking Oregon to cover that minus 40. I was watching this game rooting for Idaho to win. Because I was like, if you're not going to cover, you might as well just go ahead, drop dead and lose. It's like you're Oregon going against Idaho, and you can't even pick up a 4th and inches, man. You got your offensive linemen tripping over each other. Like, how do we contextualize the week 1 performances of Colorado and Oregon?
You do that because, well, I'm going to give Oregon a similar, not exact, but probably similar treatment in this game to what I did with Michigan last year after Bowling Green. Oregon gained double the yardage that Idaho did. They controlled the clock. They moved the ball well in between the 20s on most of their drives, but they just couldn't punch it in. Now, I still think Oregon's a team that can win it all. The issue with Colorado is I've seen Oregon last year and the year before look really good. With Colorado, it's the fact that they kind of look the same as they did last year. Granted, a little bit better on the lines of scrimmage, a little bit better at wide receiver and quarterback. But there's not the body of work as in wins and losses and also consistent game control for me to, treat those games the same. I mean, objectively, just as a single game, probably, but you look at like what they have in front of them. Oregon still has some time. They play Boise State this coming weekend, and maybe Oregon is that bad, but I'm 99.9% sure they're not. Colorado has to travel to Nebraska, who, ran for, I forget the exact numbers, but they dominated UTEP, did what they were supposed to do. They beat them 40-7. Raiola looked pretty good, and they ran for nearly 5 yards per carry, over 200 yards. They have a quarterback now, and a true freshman who's good. And while Colorado can win that game, seeing what I've seen in the past and against North Dakota. Here's another thing. Oregon scored early, and they were kind of like in that zone where they could have broke through and just blown them out, and they didn't do it. And they let Idaho hang around, and then Idaho got back. Colorado was a little bit different because from the gate, North Dakota State was competing with them for like 3 quarters. Then they pulled away a little bit. North Dakota State nearly came back. Honestly, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't think Michigan's win over Fresno State is close to Colorado's either. They'd probably be closer because Fresno State was more competitive with Michigan than Idaho was with Oregon. Scoreboard wise, of course not, but the box score only tells you so much. I mean, Oregon was up, I think, 14-0 at the half against Idaho, with easily could have been 21 or 28 with the yardage they had. Michigan was lucky to be up by 7 against Fresno State because they got their first TD on a pick, basically, in good field position on their first drive. I just think that with Colorado, they have to put things together at the lines of scrimmage, because dropping back and playing hero ball and taking deep shots, I mean, that's why West Virginia lost to Penn State, because all Garrett Green can do, and I'm not saying Shedeur is Garrett Green. He's like 100 times better than Garrett Green. Garrett Green is a gimmick quarterback. but he is. All he does is take deep shots,
It
scramble.
run, yeah.
It's not effective against elite defenses. He's like completes 50% of his throw. I'm having to hear analysts say this guy's like a good QB. I'm like, do not be deceived by the fact. It's the same thing with Jalen Milroe last year, although I think Milroe last year was way better than Green in general. Those deep passes mess with box score numbers. And you can tell when someone says that Garrett Green is like a top 10 or top 15 or great quarterback, that they're looking at the box score and they're not
All right.
accounting for strength of schedule. It's that's the reason why Penn State like defensively did so well. By the way, they actually may have the Big Ten's best defense. I don't know exactly, but you could take away the most from all the games in week 1. You can take a decent amount away from Penn State. They were pretty impressive. If Colorado can play well in the trenches, if their defense can improve, and if really their offense can improve and not stall out randomly, then they could be like a Walmart version of 2022 TCU.
You know what Colorado reminds me of? You remember
Who?
those Texas Tech Mike Leach coach teams? They were air raid, not really a lot of defense, but they had great receivers, they had a good quarterback, and they ain't care too much about running the football, but they could sling that rock with the best of them. And when I watch Colorado, they are deep at receiver. Like when I said they had the top 10 wide receiving core coming into this season, like I wasn't saying that to be like biased or overly optimistic. Like all 4 of their wide receivers, LaJohntay Western, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr., and Will Shepard, all 4 of those guys are going to be playing on Sundays next year. And with Shedeur Sanders, you give him time to throw, he's going to carve you up. But defensively, like, they didn't look to improve. Like, they did play better in the second half, but it's like they had that North Dakota State quarterback out there, Cam Miller, looking like he was the second coming of Johnny Manziel. And when I watch Oregon, it's like, I'm not going to fret too much on their week 1 performance just based off their track record. We know that Oregon has struggled to beat teams they should have blown out in the past. Like last year, they struggled against Texas Tech. So I'll give them the benefit of a doubt. But Colorado hasn't really earned that with, them going 4-8 last year. And with them playing Nebraska next week, we're about to find out just how truly good this year's Colorado team is. And with Oregon, the fact that you lost the battle in the trenches against Idaho concerns me because you're going up against a Boise State team where their running back is probably the best in the nation right now. He has 6 touchdowns in this game. Like, I don't care if you're going up against a jabroni FCS team. I mean, when your running back is carrying the load, 6 touchdowns in the game is insanity. Like,
yeah.
But everybody, this is our guy, College Football with Sam. Appreciate you for coming on. Unless you want to stay for a couple more minutes, you're always welcome. But
I can't. I'm about to fall asleep, and I got to, so I can prepare for my live show tomorrow and watch film for Texas Michigan, because I'm going to have multiple videos on that game.
You guys make sure to check our guy out, College Football with Sam, best college football channel on YouTube. He creates the best college football content on the platform. I appreciate you for coming on, my guy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. We'll have to have you on soon. I think that'd be a very fun show.
Most definitely, man. Just let me know anytime. You can set it up, my guy.
Will do. I'll set it up soon, and I will see you later.
All right, my dude.
Have a good night.
All right, everybody. That was our guy, College Football with Sam. I appreciate him for coming on, man. Make sure that you guys go ahead, check my guy out. One of my best friends that I've met on this YouTube platform thing. So subscribe to my guy, show him some love. And I got a few takes that I want to get off before I get up on out of here for the night. Okay, so Clemson, with them getting dog walked by Georgia, I mean, Clemson got absolutely embarrassed by Georgia. They lost 34-3. I was not expecting them to get throttled in this fashion. I thought they were going to be able to make this a competitive game. You always know that Clemson is going to be really good defensively, which was evident with how well their defense played in the first half of this game. But in the second half, their defense completely got gassed because the offense couldn't do anything at all. And after watching this performance from Clemson, losing to Georgia in blowout fashion, it's fair to say that they have officially fallen off from the ranks of the elite programs in college football. When you're going up against other elite teams in the sport, you got to be able to be competitive. You just can't be getting ran through the mud like how you did tonight against Georgia. I mean, it was just completely embarrassing. And Dabo Swinney, I believe he still is one of the best coaches in college football, but his stubbornness is ruining Clemson. His inability or his unwillingness to want to use the transfer portal has hurt this team so bad to the point where they have holes on the offensive line and at wide receiver that have been problems for the last 3 years. When's the last time Clemson has produced a first-round wide receiver in the NFL draft? It's been a while. And when you think of the prestige of Clemson, what has given Clemson the reputation that they have in terms of name value, when you think of Clemson football, you think of Sammy Watkins, Justin Ross, Mike Williams, DeAndre Hopkins, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. You think of superstars. They don't have any superstars on this team. At least most that we know from a general college football fan understanding. You know, they may have some really good players that diehard Clemson fans know are really good, but they don't have a lot of household names anymore. And with this loss to Georgia and the fashion that they lost this game, it's just hard for me to look at Clemson the same way that I used to look at them in years past. They aren't a team that I feel is capable of being able to contend for a national championship anymore. And I don't even think they're going to finish top 3 in the ACC this year. Virginia Tech, Louisville could finish with better records than what Clemson could end up with this year. And I don't want to overreact too much because they did play Georgia, the best team in college football. But at the same time, I consider Clemson to be an elite program. Therefore, you should be way more capable of doing more when you go up against a team like Georgia. A few years ago when you last played Georgia, you only lost 10-3. The offensive ineptness that we've seen out of Clemson the last couple of years has been downright disgusting. You don't expect that from a program that has the prestige and the reputation that Clemson has. You know, it's pretty obvious that Clemson no longer has what it takes to get back into the national title picture. They are an old relic. They're an artifact. If you think that Clemson is still a great team and they still can make it to the college football playoffs, you're living off history. You're not judging this team based off what they are now. You saw how ugly things got in the fourth quarter against Georgia. I turned the game off. There was no point watching it anymore. What was any reason to watch this game once it got out of hand? Once we got into the third quarter and Georgia started to pull away, we found out what this Clemson team was. And that is a 8-win team, maybe 9-win team at best. They don't have the talent on offense to be able to dethrone the Miami or to be able to possibly beat Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech has way more talent offensively this year than what Clemson has. And Garrett Riley, I thought he was a great hire. I still think that he's a good offensive coordinator. But there are restrictions being placed on him due to Dabo Swinney's stubbornness towards utilizing the portal to improve obvious positions of need. And I respect that Dabo is trying to do things his way. You know, he's still trying to do things rooted in tradition. And he's trying to continue to run Clemson football the way he has ran it, that has gotten it to the point that it used to be where they were on the top of the food chain in college football, knocking off the Alabama dynasty, winning 2 national championships during the past decade. Now, you look at Clemson as, a has-been. They used to be a great program. They had a good one in the 2010s, but now it's over. It's back to reality for Clemson. This is an 8-9 win team at best, and if they find a way to get into the playoffs, they're going to be nothing more but a first-round exit, because Cade Klubnik is not it at quarterback, and their inability to develop quarterbacks has kind of put them in this hole that they're in right now. It's not that Clemson can't recruit good quarterbacks. Cade Klubnik was top 10 coming out of his recruiting class. He was highly sought after by damn near every college in the nation. But you have to be able to help develop these guys, to help them ascend to that next level, to be a championship caliber team. Deshaun Watson, he wasn't a 5 or 4 star. He was a 3-star dude. But Dabo Swinney brought him in, developed him. Trevor Lawrence was a 5-star, probably the biggest recruit that Clemson has ever had. But they were able to develop him. But Clemson has struggled to develop not just quarterback, but the other positions on their offense. They can't develop offensive linemen or receivers anymore. Clemson is no longer elite program in my eyes. They're a very good program. I view them in the same lens as I view Wisconsin. Occasionally they can pop off, give you a 10-win season, but now I can't see them as a legitimate playoff contender. The only way they're going to get into the playoffs this year is if they win the ACC. They're not going to get an at-large bid because they're not going to be able to beat Notre Dame. And they're probably going to suffer at least 2 or 3 more losses this year, and they're going to be an 8-4 football team. Clemson, the glory days for this program are over. With Florida getting embarrassed and humiliated in the swamp by Miami, we got to discuss Billy Napier's future. Because if he loses to UCF in the next couple of weeks, you got to fire him after that game, because that means you will be 0-2 against the biggest schools in your state. Losing to Miami and UCF would not only damage the perception of Florida football, but it also would hurt them in recruiting, because if you're a recruit, why would you want to play for Florida if they lose to UCF and they got embarrassed by Miami? It obviously is pretty clear that Billy Napier is in over his skis down there in Florida. The same issues that the Gators had last year, being undisciplined, having blown coverages on the back end of their secondary, were the same issues that you saw exploited by Miami in this blowout loss. Nothing has changed from this year to last year out of Billy Napier. The play calling is still ultra conservative. Graham Mertz, once we got to halftime and they were showing the stat comparisons between him and Cam Ward, it looked like Billy Napier was scared for his life to try to dial up any big plays more than 15 yards downfield. And Miami's defensive line was absolutely wrecking Florida up front. Florida football is in a really dangerous spot right now because they're pretty close to becoming the next Nebraska, which is irrelevant. When you think of Florida, you think of the Tim Tebow, the Urban Meyer days, the Steve Spurrier days. If you were alive before I was born and you remember those days, now Florida is living off history. They're living off what they used to be. I was arguing on the Bleacher Report app with a Florida fan who already named his top 2 candidates who he wants Florida to go after. He said Dan Lanning and James Franklin. And I said, dude, why the hell would any of those 2 coaches leave their programs to come coach at Florida? Man, you're sleeping on Florida. This is a great job. Yeah, Florida is a great job when you think of where it's at from a location standpoint. You got a lot of access to great Florida talent. But at the same time, Florida isn't as prestigious as a program as what it used to be 2 decades ago. Florida's trying to get back to 2008, 2009. And they've gone through how many head coaches now? I mean, when's the last time Florida brought in a top 5 recruiting class? I can't tell you when, because it's been a while. Miami, the 2 years that Mario Cristobal has been able to recruit and bring in his own classes, they've washed Florida out of the water. I mean, Miami's last 2 recruiting classes have finished in the top 10. Florida consistently finishes outside of the top 10. Last year, they finished with the 13th best recruiting class. Billy Napier, not only is he not cutting it on the field, but he's not cutting it when it comes to talent acquisition. You saw a complete mismatch in this Florida-Miami game. Not only was Miami the more talented team, but they were more well coached, which kind of took a good amount of people by surprise, because one of the biggest storylines going into this matchup was Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal. How trustworthy could they be? Who was going to show why their respective fan base should have less confidence in them moving forward? And obviously, Mario Cristobal was being severely disrespected in my eyes, because people kind of forgot that Cristobal at Oregon went on the road and beat Ohio State and Columbus without 2 of his best players in 2021. He's no stranger to playing in big games and coming out on top. Billy Napier is 2-10 against top 25 teams, and with this loss, he now drops to 2-11. You're never going to get back to prominence with Billy Napier being your head coach. And if Florida misses with their next hire, they could really become Nebraska. And Nebraska's on the up and up now. I think they're going to get the 7 wins. But Florida's becoming irrelevant when it comes to the college football landscape, especially in the SEC. 10 years ago, when somebody used to bring up the SEC, the schools that always used to come to mind were Alabama, LSU, and Florida. Now when I think of the SEC, I think of Georgia, who has toppled Florida. They have now become way more prestigious than what Florida is. They now are overtaken by Tennessee, who has more momentum than Florida. I mean, think about all of the programs now who have become consistent staples in the national championship picture in the SEC that have overtaken Florida. A few years ago, Florida was one of the better programs in the SEC. Under Urban Meyer, they were the gold standard in the SEC. But now in the year 2024, Florida now is one of those schools that you look at and you say to yourself, man, they're going to be nothing better but just an average, middle-of-the-pack team at best if everything goes right. And in most years, these last 2-3 years under Billy Napier, they've been one of the worst teams in the SEC. The prestige of Florida has taken a giant hit with Billy Napier at the helm as head coach. And you got to wonder, eventually, when is Florida going to pull the plug on him? Are you really going to wait to lose to UCF to fire him? Because you might as well fire him after this game. Losing 41-17 to Miami is not only unexcusable, but it's a fireable offense. Losing to a rival is one thing. Getting blown out to a rival in your home territory is a different thing. Miami just downright came in here and disrespected Florida. They did whatever they wanted to. They couldn't stop Miami's passing attack. They couldn't block and protect Graham Mertz. The offensive line played so bad that Graham Mertz eventually got knocked out of the damn game because they couldn't keep the brother upright. Florida is in really dangerous territory right now, because if they miss on another head coach, they really can find themselves in the irrelevant part of college football where nobody even thinks about Florida anymore. And recruits stop thinking about Florida too, because it's just like, you've been down for so many years. Why should I want to play for Florida anymore? And there's a reason why so many of these Florida players keep leaving the state to play for these schools like Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama, because there's no reason for them to stay in state. But now with the reemergence of Miami football, Florida State, even if they do have a down year, you still feel pretty confident about the direction that they're heading under Mike Norvell. And if UCF takes down Florida, Where does Florida lie in the Sunshine State hierarchy of Power 4 programs? They probably will be dead last. So once UCF laps you and they overtake you, why would any recruit want to go to play for the Gators when they could play for 3 other schools that are better than them in the same state? You know, Florida's recruiting is about to take a massive hit, and their perception in my eyes, like, if you play college football at 25, you know, in dynasty mode, at the top of when you're selecting your team, there's like stars that you see, and the stars represent prestige. A 5-star program means they're super prestigious. They got a lot of history, a lot of tradition. But if you have a year in your dynasty mode when you don't live up to expectations and you have less than the expected win amount, then you lose prestige. You can go from a 5-star program to a 4-star program. And right now, Florida, to me, has 3 stars right now. They are not as prestigious now as what they used to be in the past. You know, when I used to think of Florida football, I used to always think of a team that was in the forefront of contending not only for the SEC title, but for a national championship. But it seems like year after year, the expectations continue to get worse and worse and worse. It's like now, if you're a Florida fan, you're happy if you can just get the 6 wins. It doesn't matter if you got the toughest schedule in college football. There was a time in college football when Florida was knocking off anybody. It didn't matter how tough their schedule was. Nobody wanted to see Florida. Now it's like you want to play Florida because you know it's going to be an easy win. I can't believe that I've been old enough to witness the rise and fall of Florida football. And I hate to say that despite being a Miami Hurricanes fan because it makes me feel old. And I hate feeling old. I'm only 22 years old. But I shouldn't be able to remember the days when Florida was a national championship contender, watching the magical Tim Tebow with that 15. Something was special about that Tim Tebow 15, man. When I think of Florida, the only member I have of this program now is Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer. Outside of that, what does this program have? You know, like, I just hate what Florida has become. And I really did expect this game against Miami to be a lot closer. Like, I knew that I was talking a lot of shit during the offseason, but I honestly thought that this was going to be a really tightly contested game. It was going to come down to the wire. I wasn't expecting a 41-17 murder like what we saw. Shout out to my guy Slap Happy with the $5 donation. He says SC versus LSU. Man, I'm rolling with USC. I'm not going to put any money on it right now because I'm not confident in picking a winner for either team, you know, or I'm not confident with picking a winner in this game only because these teams are really evenly matched. They're more evenly matched than what the media has been talking about. You know, everybody keeps making it seem like LSU has this significant talent advantage over LSU when both of these programs are starting new quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier, Miller Moss, they both looked fantastic in their bowl outings last year. But LSU, outside of them having a better offensive line than USC, they're evenly matched at every other position. I mean, USC is just as good at running back as what LSU is. Both teams are good at receiver. And the defenses for both teams are major question marks. And they both have new coaching staffs. And what kind of irritates me about the way people talk about USC football is that they just make it seem like Lincoln Riley has made no efforts at all to change the defense. He hires D'Anton Lynn, who in only one season took UCLA from being a bottom defense in college football to being a top 15 unit. But everybody talks about LSU's hiring of Blake Baker and all of the new staff changes that they've made. North Dakota State's head coach from last year is on USC staff. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about how they got a defensive coordinator from Houston that was a finalist for the Jim Bortles Award in 2022. I'm really excited for this USC LSU game. I am going to take USC to win and to cover that +4, but I'm not confident enough to put money on it because this definitely is a game that could go either way. But these teams are identically similar to each other. And if they were looking at each other in the mirror, they would see reflections of themselves. Shout out to my guy, Demetrius Abrams. He says, what's up, JT? You doing all right? How about them Canes beating the Gators? Yeah, let's talk about it some more. So, listen. Miami committed first-degree murder in the swamp today, man. The 41-17 beatdown is what we all had the joy of being able to watch on our television screens. And I'm going to be honest with you. As a diehard Miami fan, I was not expecting this game to be as one-sided as what it was. I thought that this was going to be a highly competitive game. It was going to come down to the wire in the fourth quarter. But after the first quarter, it was pretty evident that Miami was the better team. I mean, Cam Ward, this dude was looking like a superstar out there. Outside of that one interception that he threw, I mean, Florida could not stop this, brother. Anytime they sent the blitz after Cam Ward, he was always dissecting it. He was tearing Florida's defense up, no matter if they were sending pressure or if they were just giving him a clean pocket to operate. They couldn't do anything to stop Cam Ward. And defensively, Miami's pass rush was absolutely obliterating Florida up front. And it was so bad to the point where Graham Mertz got taken out of this game. Like, Miami put this dude out of the game due to Florida's inability to be able to keep Graham Mertz upright. I was not expecting such a one-sided affair, especially when Florida fans were hyping up just how hard it is to win in the swamp. You know, I find it so funny how Florida fans were chirping all offseason about how difficult this game was going to be for Miami, having to play it with 90,000 screaming fans. Cam Ward, how was he going to do in a new system? He could potentially struggle, get out to a slow start because this was a new team. And Mario Cristobal, you know, he couldn't be trusted. But what Florida fans didn't talk about enough is how Billy Napier couldn't be trusted. And the same issues that we saw out of Billy Napier last year with this team being undisciplined, the play calling being conservative, Austin Armstrong's defenses having coverage lapses, were the same problems that kept on being exploited by Miami in this game. I mean, Billy Napier, how many passes do you remember in this game being thrown past 15 yards or more? I can probably only tell you about 2 or 3 of them. How many times did Florida's defense have costly penalties on third down? And they weren't like face mask or pass interference. They were, you know, just dumb penalties. Penalties that made you go, bro, like, what are you doing? Why are you being so extra? Being undisciplined, not being well coached, is what we saw out of this Florida team tonight. And that's why I wasn't surprised at the outcome. I knew Miami was going to win this game. I've been saying it all offseason. I was surprised in the manner Miami won this game. I wasn't expecting a 41-17 slaughterfest. Florida couldn't even get a third down. They were 1-9 in third down situations. I don't think they converted a single third down until in the fourth quarter. Their first 8 third down attempts, they went 0-8. I mean, they dominated on the ground. They had 139 rushing yards. They were averaging 5 yards per carry. Normally, when Florida has success running the football, they end up having a pretty good game. But, I mean, when you look at how lackluster their passing offense was, it was really surprising because Florida does have a pretty good group of wide receivers. You got Eugene Wilson, you got Chimray DK, you got Elijah Badger. I mean, we didn't hear those guys' names being called that often. And I believe if Florida had Dan Mullen coaching in this game, it would have been way closer. Dan Mullen didn't lose to Miami. And I know that when Dan Mullen got fired, there was a lot of reasonings to go into that decision outside of that one losing season. You know, he didn't get along with the athletic director. People felt like he quit on the team because he was focusing on trying to become a head coach in the NFL. And that's understandable. But you have a hard time convincing me that in the new age of NIL and the transfer portal, Florida wouldn't be in better shape right now with Dan Mullen as their head coach as compared to Billy Napier. You know, like, even if all that is true about Dan Mullen, he quit on the team, he was eyeballing the NFL. You know, if you would have brought him back, talked it over, you know, he could have gotten way more out of being the head coach of Florida now than what it was a few years ago. I mean, you couldn't blame him for wanting to leave for the NFL. There are a lot of college coaches that want to leave for the NFL just because how rigorous it is to be a coach at the college level. It's like you're working nonstop. You got to recruit. You're always on the road. When you're in the NFL, you get days off. There are no days off in college football, really. And for Dan Mullen, you know, I would like to believe that he would have had more success in recruiting now that you can buy players pretty much than what he did during his time. Because, you know, he wasn't somebody that really cared too much about recruiting. He did enough, but it's not like Dan Mullen was just all flat recruiting. I mean, he recruited Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts. Both those dudes were first-round picks. How many first-round picks has Billy Napier recruited and developed? Nobody. Ricky Pearsall doesn't count. He started out at Arizona State. You know, like, Miami to dominate Florida the way that they did in this game really took me by surprise. And, you know, Miami's going to be a great team this year. They're going to win that ACC. It's pretty clear that the ACC is possibly the weakest conference in college football that's considered a power conference. Virginia Tech lost to Vandy. I mean, Clemson got dragged by Georgia. Miami was the only team in this conference that really handled up and handled business this week. So, yeah, man, that's my thoughts on Miami versus Florida. Miami splatters the Gators in the swamp. They just painted the swamp in Florida's blood that Miami is back. And I really do believe that the U is going to be back this year. I'm not going to say the U is back right now because, you know, Miami only beat Florida. Florida isn't going to be that good this year. They had an over-under win total of 4.5 for a reason. Now, I want to make sure I don't leave out anything before I get up on out of here. Oh, yeah, there is one more thing I want to talk about. Colorado, after their performance against North Dakota State last week, I got a good read on what this team is going to be this year. And I feel this year's version of Colorado is going to be a lot similar to those Mike Leach coached Texas Tech teams. You know, they're going to be all air raid, all pass heavy, not really a lot of emphasis on running the football. But Colorado can win games without having a dominant rushing attack this year because we saw them put together an 8-minute drive and their win against North Dakota State, not really running the football, but just, you know, having a ball control offense by how effective they were throwing the football with Shedeur Sanders. You know, not every play that Colorado had in the passing game was a big play for a 50-yard touchdown. There were a lot of throws where Shedeur Sanders was just taking what the defense gives him, and he was just dinking and dumping his way downfield. And Colorado can win that way. It's going to be hard for too many teams to be able to guard the kind of receivers that Colorado has on their roster this year. You got Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr., LaJohntay Western, Will Shepard, the transfer from Vandy. All four of those guys are going to be playing in the NFL next year. And they're not going to be day 3 draft picks, all of them. LaJohntay, Jimmy Horn Jr. easily should go in day 2, anywhere between round 2, round 3 of the draft, round 4 at the latest. And we already know Travis Hunter is going to be one of the first players drafted in next year's draft class. So Colorado this year, their offensive line does look a little bit improved, but they still aren't that good. And I do have a lot of concerns about them and how they're going to hold up for the entirety of this season. But overall, this is a way more dynamic passing attack that you see out of Colorado this year compared to what you saw last year. Last year, there were only really two guys who were consistent enough to carry the load for Colorado offensively at receiver. And that was Travis Hunter and Xavier Weaver. Now you got four number ones that are more than capable of being able to step up. You don't need Travis Hunter out there on every drive for every play to be able to move the ball offensively. You know, there are more than enough receivers that can go for over 100, 200 in a game. You know, you saw Jimmy Horn Jr. damn near have 200 receiving yards against North Dakota State. LaJohntay Western is more than capable of having those kinds of performances. Like, it's going to be a conveyor belt when you think of the kind of production that Colorado's going to get out of receiver. One game you're going to have Will Shepherd go for 100 plus. Another game you may have LaJohntay or Jimmy Horn Jr. go for 100 plus, and on a good amount of games that you watch, you're going to see Travis Hunter going for over 100 a pop. You know, there's so much depth and talent in Colorado's receiving room that they don't need to be a dominant run team. All they need to be able to do is run the football when they want to. And that's the problem with Colorado this year. They can't run the football when they need to or when they want to because their offensive line isn't consistent enough. And I knew that this offensive line wasn't going to be massively improved from what it was last year. I'm only expecting this offensive line to be average because that's all Shedeur Sanders needs. You saw Shedeur Sanders last week, that he's throwing to. But there were a lot of plays where the offensive line just broke down, but he was able to make a guy or two miss and make a big play happen. Against Nebraska, it's going to be hard-pressed, or you're going to be hard-pressed to see Colorado have the kind of success they had last week when the protection broke down up front with how good Nebraska's defensive line is and the amount of experience that they return on that side of the football. And defensively, Colorado's defense is still non-existent. The pass rush is a little bit better. I'm not going to say massively better, but they're a lot better at getting after the quarterback than what they were last year. But there were still a lot of moments where you could watch that North Dakota State game and Colorado's D-line get no push at all. I mean, they're not even collapsing the pocket for crying out loud. And North Dakota State still won the time of possession battle. When you have a team that goes up against you and they just dominate you in TOP, that shows that you're not that good defensively. Because good defenses get you off the field. They don't allow you to take all this time off the clock. And I don't trust Colorado's defense to win the game. They're secondary. Everybody that they got at corner, not named Travis Hunter, was getting cooked back there. Shiloh Sanders. I mean, this dude is garbage. And I love all of the Sanders kids. I love Deion Sanders. But let's be honest. If it wasn't for Deion being his dad and being the head coach, he probably would be on the bench. And he's not a bad player. He just is playing out of position. He's a linebacker playing safety. If he gets drafted at the next level, they're moving him to linebacker because that's where he's better suited for. All he cares about is, looking for big hits, creating fumbles, laying the wood on somebody. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't play safety with that mentality because safeties that play with this headhunter mentality, there's a reason why he has headache gang in his bio. All he's looking for is big hits. He's a lot similar to Jamal Adams. When he's playing closer to the line of scrimmage, they got him against tight ends or running backs. He's really good at covering those dudes. He's really good in short area, and which is why I think he makes for a perfect linebacker. He does have really good instincts. He has a knack for always being around the football, and even when he's not making a play, he's always somewhere in the proximity. So it's not like the dude doesn't have high football IQ. I just don't think he has enough IQ to play that safety position properly. He's better suited to play linebacker at the next level. But overall, Colorado is slightly improved, but I still don't see a team that's massively better from what we saw out of Colorado in 2023. Now, they did play North Dakota State. That's their first game of the season. We're going to see more of this team as we progress throughout this year. And they got a really big test coming up, going on the road to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the Cornhuskers year 2 under Matt Rule. And if Dylan Raiola is as good as advertised, Colorado's going to have a difficult time winning that game. That defense is going to be able to slow down Colorado's offense. The question is, can Colorado's defense slow down Nebraska's offense? Because Nebraska, they damn near might be able to run the football at will. What costed Nebraska last year is that quarterback play was just non-existent. It's hard to win when you got garbage quarterbacks. But this year, with this Dylan Raiola dude, they are a legitimate team that can probably win 8, maybe 9 games max. They're going to be bowling this year. And Colorado, you know, they don't improve that defensive line. It's going to be a long night for them up down there in Lincoln. But shout out to everybody in the chat, man. Shout out to my guy Slap Happy. Appreciate you with the donation. Shout out to my guy Jay Vito. Shout out to Chris Brady. Shout out to my guy Mark Cheney. Shout out to my guy Unruly TV. He says Ohio State smoke. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in wherever you're at. X, YouTube, hit that like button, share the live stream, and give us a follow or subscribe to the channel. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and when we drop new content. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in to this late night edition of JT Sports Live. We're going to be going live next Saturday after all of the week 2 college football games get played. And we also going to be going live Sunday after all of the NFL games get played. And I'm also hoping to have the call-in show going so you guys can be able to call in, you know, rattle off your takes, say, you know, how you feel. If you just need to vent because your team just pissed you off, then, you know, that's your chance to do so. So you're going to see a call-in show next time we go live next week so I can be more interactive with you people. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in to this late episode. I know this probably wasn't one of our better episodes because, you know, I am really tired. I've been up since like 6 o'clock this morning, you know, ready to watch some college football. But I appreciate everybody that's tuned in and everybody that supports the channel. And football season is officially back. I will be live streaming for you guys Monday. Giving my thoughts on the upcoming NFL matchups that we're going to see. Got some more thoughts on a few college football matchups. You definitely are going to see me upload a short episode of the podcast after the USC LSU game because that's just such a big game. But yeah, I appreciate all of you who tuned into this episode, and I'll see you guys shortly.